This is a series of programs that I'd like to give about world events that are taking place as we speak. And my name is Steve Clark, and this channel is going to be called The Hound Dog for obvious reasons, because I just love sniffing out the story. Now, what I wanted to talk to you today is about an article that I just read. It's about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and it's written by Dan Bresnitz, who is the Monk Chair of Innovation Studies, and is a co-director of the Innovation Policy Lab at the Monk School of Global Affairs at the University of Toronto. He is the author and co-author of several books on innovation-based growth. Now, I don't like reading too much because it doesn't look that great when you're trying to present, but I'll just read to you a little bit of what it says here. The heading is Trans-Pacific Partnership. TPP is a wonderful idea for China. The website of the Office of the US Trade Representative proudly describes the Trans-Pacific Partnership as a made in America. It does so to position this treaty, made up of a motley crew of allies, as a bulwark of free competitive markets against China. It is only fair then to judge the TPP on these merits. Will it lead to freer, more competitive markets and more rapid economic growth? Does it offer a better future for the US and for the US and Canadian middle classes? Worryingly to those of us who believe that entrepreneurship is crucial for economic growth, the TPP is failing on its declared goals. Once ratified, the agreement will make our markets less free, less competitive, and it will particularly hurt innovation-based entrepreneurship. This could not come at a worse time for our future economic growth, since, as the Economist has just reported, we are already at historic lows in the formation and growth of new companies and historically high levels of concentration across many industries. So what we've seen is the larger corporations have gobbled up the smaller corporations, and they have basically made it impossible, or virtually impossible, for new startup companies to get a leg hold in today's competitive market. And this deal will just seal that up, lock, stock and barrel. I'll just read some of the headings here and some of the things that I know to be true about this deal. Limits information. The TPP has written into it certain clauses that deal with copyright issues. Now, as things stand right now, you can copyright something, but once it goes out into the public, there is a fair use application to that, and that anyone can use portions of that to show other people. Now, under the TPP, say for example you decide to send a link from a publication to a friend, you may be getting into copyright infringement issues. Just like the music industry, if you download anything, you have breached copyright. There's no fair use there when it gets out in the public. It's not out in the public anymore. It belongs to these corporations. And what this will do is it will just absolutely shut down any information sharing, any cross-border information sharing. You can see this is happening now in France. They're basically trying to shut down the internet and the alternate news websites because of the events of November the 13th. And of course China is following suit, and they're trying to shut down their websites and force IP providers to release certain information about people, all in the name of terrorism. So instead of expanding idea sharing, which was the most innovative era of our history, when we go back to the coffee shops and the Renaissance and some of the enlightened thinking that came out of that era, some of our greatest discoveries came out of collaboration and sharing of ideas, and now we want to shut down the sharing of ideas. This is, as this chap says, probably the worst thing that can happen right now. Our industry has been decimated. Our debt servicing in the province and nationwide is basically buckling this country with interest payments. And of course, it's just like any household that gets itself into debt over its head. The same kind of conversations take place there. What is important? What are we going to do? How are we going to change this? How are we going to break out of this cycle? And of course, one of the things that people usually try and do is innovate. And so to try and shut down innovation in the 21st century it's such a dinosaur way of thinking about things. I can't believe that they're even going to consider this. So we have these chilling effects of the dispute resolution mechanism. Now, from what I understand, for example, we have living examples here in Canada where China, under the Canada-China FIPA that was ratified in 2013, I believe, China can now buy resource companies in Canada, and it has done. It's bought Maxon Oil and Husky Oil. So China can start drilling for oil or looking for resources, and it can do so in any way, shape or form that it chooses. And should Canada, the Canadian government, say, hey, wait a minute, we have some rules and regulations about that, we don't like the way you're treating your workers, we don't like the wages you're paying them, and we don't like the big mess that you're making when you're drilling for oil. The Chinese can rightly say, under this deal, that we have infringed on their right to make a profit. They can send that to a tribunal. Now, the tribunal is made up of 3 people, and 3 lawyers usually, and those lawyers do not necessarily come from Canada. The tribunal does not necessarily sit in Canada. We don't get to see the evidence, and we don't get to appeal the decision, and the decision is binding. So this group of 3 people has more power than the sovereignty of your own government to make decisions within its own territorial borders. Are you getting a grasp of what this actually means to Canada if we ratify this deal? It's already been signed. It was signed under the Harper government and touted as being the best deal that we could get in Canada. It's an absolute disaster, and now of course this chap Dan Bresnitz is coming out and saying exactly the same thing. And I hope that Justin Trudeau is listening, is reading these articles, and that his advisors are telling him, no, Justin, do not ratify this deal. It is terrible. It'll stifle, it'll choke, it will stop any growth in this country of new technologies, of information technologies, the growth of information technologies. We're sitting on the cutting edge of computing in this country. We are leaders in 3D printing design. There are just some incredible things that are taking place in this country as far as technological innovation. BlackBerry, incredible. I mean, I know they've been to their difficulties, but they had an encryption process second to none, which is why every councillor and every politician carried around a BlackBerry in their pockets, because they couldn't be hacked into. And we all know now how important encryption is. So this deal is basically going to put the power into a very concentrated group of corporations who really only have one agenda, which is to crush any competition whatsoever. And I might add that all of these Fortune 500 corporations are all now well situated within the borders of China. And who is the TPP a good deal for? Oh, for China. Well, fancy that. And we've already hollowed out our manufacturing in this country. I mean, I really don't know where you're going to create wealth, from the service sector. I mean, who's buying those services, and where do those people get that money from? It is all from resources, working in resources, and of course we've seen an absolute collapse in the resource sector, and from manufacturing, and the manufacturing has left this country. So really, what is left? Service and high-tech management, and banking. That is about it. Well, what else are we going to export? What else are we going to draw people into this country with? So here you have a household that is saddled with an enormous amount of debt, and looks like it's about to enter into a deal that's going to stifle any kind of innovation, any kind of wealth creation that might help this country. The time is now to wake up to what is going on. The time is now to be in contact with your politician and with your friends and neighbours and talking about these issues. Because if we don't talk about them, they don't get out into the public. And most people, when I talk to people, they say the TPP or the TTIP, this is the Transatlantic Partnership and Prosperity Package, excuse me, which is a similar kind of deal but with the Atlantic side of corporations. So this is basically going to put us right behind the 8 ball. I mean, I came to this country and this country was a prosperous, a booming country, and now through debt we have turned it into what it is, a poorhouse. Now, as I say, there are still some good things going on in Canada, but this will be the death knell. This deal here will be the death knell of all small business, all innovative, competitive new businesses that come online just won't be able to get their foot in the door, won't be able to find financing. You know, it's just an absolute disgrace. It's an absolute disgrace, and I really don't know what else to say about it, but we really need to put pressure on the Liberal government to not ratify this deal, to take the courage to turn our backs. We already have deals with these countries. We don't need a Trans-Pacific Partnership. And why would you want one partnership that paints everything the same colour? Surely your arrangements with China will be different from that of Japan, of that of South Korea, of that of Taiwan, of that of the Middle East, Europe, Germany, France, Switzerland. You know, all of these different countries, they all have their own particular perspective, just like every individual. No one deal is good for all people. That's why we negotiate deals individually. And now we're being negotiated into a deal where we have to take good and bad, and actually there is no good. We get nothing out of this deal. It doesn't benefit manufacturing, it doesn't benefit innovation, it doesn't benefit the middle class, it doesn't benefit the working class, it doesn't benefit the self-employed, it doesn't benefit the municipalities or the province or the federal government. If you can tell me who it does benefit, well, I'd like to hear that. Anyway, so that's my little rant on the TPP, and it is definitely about time that we all started talking about this horrible, horrible deal. Okay, well, thank you very much, and as I said, we're coming up on New Year's Eve. Is Thursday this week, just 2 scant days away, and I will be amazed to see what happens in 2016. I'm predicting an incredible just acceleration forward in Uber and the services that Uber provides. I think you're going to see Bitcoin is going to start rising up as a dependable transaction mechanism. You know, they put 8,000 Bitcoin machines into Greece because, of course, their banking system is still tumbling and falling apart. And, of course, businesses, you know, if you can only get 60 euros or $60 a day out of the bank, how on earth can you run a business? So these innovative people brought in the Bitcoin machines, and now they're learning how to transact in the real world and using Bitcoin in everyday life. And so this is going to accelerate. This is going to accelerate the use of Bitcoin. I actually downloaded my Bitcoin wallet, and I bought my first Bitcoin the other day, and I'm going to explain that to you as well, so that you know how to do that. I think it is very important to at least have one Bitcoin in your possession to understand how this technology works. I think 3D printing is going to come along. I think you're going to see a lot of improvement in the quality of things that are being printed. Remember, right now we're at the innovative stage of this, and goodness knows what it will look like when it finally unfolds and we see some of the very sophisticated things from medical to parts replication. And can you imagine if you had a service van with a 3D printer in there and you could just print the part that you wanted? When you think of the transportation that wouldn't be needed to ship stuff around, if you could say, I know you'd never be able to get 100%, but if you could get, say, 30 or 40% of the things that you purchased, I could print in this house, the amount of resource extraction, the amount of pollution, the amount of trucks on the road would drop drastically. And I think you see an immediate improvement in air quality. I think you'd see an immediate improvement in water quality, and I think you see an immediate improvement in the cost of things that you purchase, especially when you can print one washer. When you don't have to buy a pack of 5 down at the store there when you only need one. So those kind of things are going to be game changers. But the Bitcoin, that's the big game changer. That's going to be the one to watch. And of course we have all the Middle East issues. We have Syria is still a boiling pot. It is now coming out that Assad and the president of Turkey are involved in funding, Saudi Arabia are involved in funding ISIS. So the plot thickens. Russia is well into Syria. Goodness knows what is going to happen there. I mean, it's looking like the Middle East is going to implode. And goodness knows what we will see then. You think we have a refugee crisis now. The displacement of human population will be staggering, and Europe will be the #1 destination. So you can see a complete overwhelming of the infrastructure, the social infrastructure, by people, just putting pressure on the system, who don't have jobs, who don't have money, completely distressed. They probably all need to go to a trauma clinic. They're probably all shell-shocked from some of the things that they've gone through. And then of course there is the terrorist issue. You don't have these kind of displacements without people getting angry. And that is the root of terrorism. I often feel that terrorism is a kind of misplaced name. We think of, well, where did these terrorists come from? They just didn't fall out of the sky. It just didn't fall out of the sky. So terrorism is a created thing. Terrorism is usually a reaction to something, a despotic leader, a regime, a system, a way of doing business. Most people don't revolt. There's just too much to lose. Well, look at Syria. I don't know how much you can believe about what's happening in Syria, but they went up against the government, and it is a bloody all-out battle. And that's why most people will take an awful lot before they revolt, because you think I want to spoil what I'm doing? You think I want to spoil my business? No, nobody wants to do that. And that's why I'm glad that the internet and agorism has come along just when we need it. This is the revolution, the revolution, the evolution of things through the internet, where we can openly trade with each other. We must always work on fighting these deals, standing up against these deals that cut down on information sharing. We are the ones who benefit from information sharing, and there are 8 billion of us, and if we want it, we get to keep it. You just have to say so. You just have to speak up and let your voice be heard. Do not sit in isolation. Do not feel that you can't do anything. What was that I heard the other day? If you think you're too small to have an effect, go to bed with a mosquito in the room. There you go, and you'll soon find out how a very small thing can keep you awake most of the night. So as I said, we're coming towards the new year. We're excited about what's going to happen next year. I think there are going to be some real changes next year. I think we're going to really see this downturn is going to kick in. The Baltic Dry Index is now hitting new lows. The velocity of money is at an all-time low. I think when they start calculating the Christmas figures, they're going to find that they were low. I think you're going to see the layoffs are going to start in January and February. I think there's going to be a realization that we're going to have to change the way we view our lives, our lifestyle, and the way we do business. Anyway, I wish, well, there's a dark side and a bright side. You know, I remember, I'll just say this before I close out. I remember a guy, I forget his name now, but he was an advisor, a consultant, and he was asked by a company what the next 100 years would hold. And he said, well, the same as the last 2,000 years. Oh, what's that? They asked. Well, lots of opportunities with some challenges. So we're going to see opportunities, but with challenges, because we're restructuring now. These institutions that we've had, these pyramidic organized institutions, are no longer working, and because of the internet, we're finding out much better ways to do business.